Hey, what's up, everybody? We are live. This is the Box and One podcast. If you're joining us for the first time, hopefully you enjoy the show. On today's show, we're going to be talking about obviously the Blue Jays and their 2-0 loss against the Rays. So we'll go through it a little bit, but first, before you do that, to help us out a little bit, we'd really appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to our show. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram. All the links are in the description. But I don't want to put it off too much. A little bit disappointing.
Yeah, look, they've been like 9 of the last 11 now, so no complaints. Rasmussen pitched well, but I think there was a little bit of element of luck involved as well. There were a lot of sharp outs. I'm looking at the box score on Baseball Savant. The first inning, the line out from Springer, the expected average was 860. Simeon, okay, that was a single. Then the double play that Vlad hit to.
Are you guys hearing an echo?
Yeah, I'm getting that echo.
Yeah, me too. 860. Simeon, okay, that was a single. Then the double play that Vlad hit. Does someone have our YouTube on? It seems like
I don't.
I don't.
Yeah, me neither. Let me check.
I think it's gone now.
It's gone now, so we're good.
Okay, perfect, awesome. So yeah, there were a lot of I don't want to say like loud outs because they weren't like deep fly balls, but there were a lot of sharply hit balls, straight to the infielders or a few to the outfielders as well. But anyways, part of the game. Now Yankees are winning. Let's just hope that Red Sox, Mariners can do us a solid, and we'll still be in the top 2 spots.
Yeah, and I guess the most disappointing part was that we had we started at one inning off with Springer with the double, and then we had first and second with I think it was 1 out, and we didn't get anything out of it. I think that was the most disappointing part of it. And I know there's a lot of people who were questioning Charlie on Twitter about pulling Barrios in the 7th. And, subsequently we give up Meza gives up a home run right after that. But it looks like that part didn't even matter because we weren't even able to score a run.
No, absolutely. And later on we find out that he had to leave because of some discomfort from it.
Abdominal tightness in his left side, and he's receiving treatment.
Yeah, he pitched. He gave you 7 innings. Meza has been a reliable pitcher for you. So coming in on the 8th, at least I wasn't too concerned. He gave up a home run. Big deal, but they would have lost anyways. Bats were pretty much shut down. That's one frustrating thing playing against the Tampa. They have the best bullpen in AL. Like, if you don't get to their starter, it's kind of hard to catch up. Like, we saw against Baltimore 2 games in a row. They came back in the 9th. Tampa's a bit of a different beast altogether, so it's the best bullpen in the AL. So you have to get to the starters early, find a way. So once that didn't happen, it looked pretty bleak.
They hit some balls hard that were hit right at guys. So they had their chances. I don't think Rasmussen fooled them. I just think they had some hard hit balls. The defense was well aligned. And they got beat. It's good teams that happens, right?
Yeah, Rasmussen only generated like 4 swings and misses altogether. So you can imagine it's not as if he was fooling them. And I'm just looking the first inning, Springer 860 expected average, Simeon he singled, but Vlad 390. Then Dickerson in the next inning 380. So they were hitting him hard. McGuire lined out at 890 expected batting average. So they were hitting him pretty well, just straight at the fielders.
How worried did you guys get when you saw Springer legging out that double and kind of awkwardly going into second?
I think a little less than the single that he tried to leg out yesterday. Where he kind of ran through the first base, and you can see that there was a little bit of discomfort. So I think I was a little bit more nervous yesterday, but then because he ended up playing today, I'm like, okay, it's kind of one of those things that you'll have to deal with till the end of the season. But yeah, every time he kind of looks uncomfortable, it's like cringeworthy moment. It's like, God, not at this point, you know.
I mean, would it be the end of the world if we do end up losing him? Because and the only reason I ask is because he hasn't looked entirely comfortable.
No, but I think it. Yeah, I mean, he had a big impact when he was there first time up, right before his second stint. So I would still say, yeah. I mean, it hasn't really impacted them much. They've been on an offensive, like they've been going crazy last little while, but a lot of that offense has come from the bottom of the lineup. You can't always expect that. So I would say it's going to be a pretty big deal if they lose Springer, because again, you're shortening that lineup. You're bringing someone else in like a Grichuk or a Dickerson. Yeah, it's still probably going to impact. I think they can still manage his workload a little bit. Given it's towards the end of the season, I'm sure Charlie probably wants to give Vlad a few days off as well from playing defense. So Springer can probably automatically get a couple of days off here and there. So hopefully they're able to manage him that way.
Their win percentage is much, much higher with him in the lineup. And I know there's a lot more that goes to it because you've got to look at strength of schedule, how everybody else is playing, et cetera, but he extends that lineup. Like, that's the difference between, and like as Adam says, like the bottom of the lineup guys aren't always going to hit. Like Breivik Valera are going to get 3 hits a game forever. So he's the difference between having to bring an extra guy off the bench into a lineup on a regular basis, and it does shorten that lineup. And sometimes just that extra little bit of length makes a difference. Like the difference between Gurriel hitting 6th or 7th matters, especially in the game when you get into just that extra guy that a bullpen that an elite reliever has to face. When they're going through the middle of the lineup, they can't just get through 6 and say, all right, we're good. Now that one more at bat, one more above average hitter makes it tougher.
No, on that note, there's one thing that kind of I was a little curious about it. I don't want to question the decision making, like some of those weirdos on Twitter all the time questioning Charlie Montoyo. But I mean, given where we're at, was it really necessary to start Reese McGuire? I mean, he ends up getting a hit, so it's really not much I can argue. But you have Jansen. Why would you start him?
What's interesting, not so much starting him. Maybe, Barrios. I haven't checked the pitcher catcher. Maybe Barrios likes throwing to him. When he got on base in the 6th, I thought that when they were down by 1-0, I was thinking that would be a good time for a pinch runner.
Yep, I agree, 100%. I thought you could probably bring Dyson in or somewhere.
When you're carrying 2 catchers, you can do that a little earlier in the game that you'd like. I would have liked to have seen that. So if I'm ultimately, nobody hit behind them, but you know what? You put a Dyson on, maybe. I don't know if he would necessarily steal, but hey, that could be the difference between going 1st to 3rd versus 1st to 2nd, right? So I think that would have been a move to make.
Yeah, last time Barrios pitched, Jansen was behind the plate, and he threw 6 2/3, struck out 8, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, that was the only. That's the only what I thought. Like maybe they have a good working relationship. Again, I haven't seen the Barrios catching stats, like who he throws best to. Mm-hmm. Maybe he says I like McGuire. I don't. These are just ideas I'm throwing out there.
For sure. Yeah, I just even have an idea, right? And especially after the 6th, like you said, like you're struggling offensively. Kirk's hitting well, Jansen's hitting well. Sure, Reese is a lefty. But a bad lefty, is that a better substitute than a good righty hitter? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's more. Like even just the lefty thing, and as we've learned, it's that it's not just where lefty versus righty. In this case, maybe that it's what does the pitcher throw? What are the pitcher's bread and butter pitches versus what pitches are you good at hitting? So if a pitcher has a really good curveball and you're a hitter that demolishes curveballs, who cares if it's a lefty or righty? You should be in there. So I didn't have as big a problem with him starting. Because why even carry him if you're not going to start him? But you could find other uses for that roster spot. But I think definitely I would have pinch run for him in the sixth inning.
And so it's a little bit of a quick turnaround because they're playing tomorrow afternoon, right, at 3. What's the matchup tomorrow? Who's pitching?
Robbie Ray.
Good news.
Yeah. So hold on, it's. I am so sorry. I'm so unprepared.
It doesn't matter.
2 hour live.
Sorry. Michael Walker's pitching tomorrow.
Interesting.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Michael Walker. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael Walker.
I think we're both just we're both looking at the website. So
Okay.
I'm looking at the
I'm feeling left
we
out.
obviously can't multitask.
Yeah, this is so.
So that's why we never did well at the call center. So
That's exactly why.
Yeah, I mean, this was an opportunity to beat up on a mediocre pitcher. That said, knowing the Rays, he'll probably go through they could end up throwing an opener at them again, or just get him out after like 1.5 times through the lineup.
So here's the thing. So Azam, when you were talking about it, I think it was a couple weeks ago when you were looking at the schedule. We have tomorrow against the Rays. We have 3 more against the Rays after this, correct?
correct.
And we have 2 series against the Twins. And I think when you were looking at the schedule overall, you were saying we should at least split with the Rays.
Yes.
So ideally, a win tomorrow. I mean, wins all the time are good, but ideally, a win tomorrow makes it a little bit easier in the next series against the Rays. But ultimately, like, we have to take care of business against the Twins anyways, which should be easy. But I mean, you never know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we had this terrible stretch towards the end of August, and we lost a series to Baltimore, I think, and Detroit for sure. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Regardless of what they do against Tampa, I mean, they have to take care of Minnesota like a real dominant team. And ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the last series of the season against the Yankees, 3 games. It's interesting because Yankees kind of have a slightly harder path because they have to go through 3 against the Jays and 3 against the Red Sox. So the good thing that works in Jays' favor is that between Yankees and Red Sox, one's going to be 1 game back after that series, right? So depending on how close the 3 teams are, one's going to fall back. And if Jays just at least win against the Twins, keeps them in contention, and you don't lose too much ground to Tampa.
It's amazing how we have just 1 loss after this month has like a sort of a negative feel, like, oh, we have to win this one, and we have to.
No. It's not that. But I mean, you won a ridiculous number of games in a short period of time to get to where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you just want to talk about regression, if you're a 560 or 600 team, you're probably going to lose another 3-4 games, right? You just don't. It's okay if you lose, let's say, the next series to Tampa, or it's not going to be the end of the world, but you can't lose those 2 series against Twins.
Yep. So, interestingly, Walker, he hasn't been open for in recent times. He has been starting games, and again, like his last few starts have been against below 500 opponents. They get him out after 5. I mean, he went 6 versus the Twins, but for the most part, he's been going 4 to 5 innings. Like your typical 5th starter with a Rays style, so they're going to have a very limited window to beat him up. He's homer prone, and then you have Ray going. So let's say you have a 4-inning window to pound him tomorrow before the pen comes in.
Yeah, I would agree.
Hey, if I'm the Rays, I would use the opener against the Jays tomorrow. Just don't let Vlad face him.
Yeah, I mean, if you want him to go through the line of 1.5 times, then it makes sense to start off from 4th or 5th starter, right? 5th player in the lineup. So go with an opener for the first inning, and then let him go 4 after, 4 or 5 after. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see them doing that. Like yesterday, God, why am I forgetting names? Who was the starter yesterday but didn't actually start? They went with Colin McHugh as the opener, and then it's the lefty that always gets to them, but then the Jays finally beat him up.
Ryan Yarbrough.
Yeah, Yarbrough. Sorry. Oh, so sorry. Yeah. Yarbrough gets open. I mean, he was listed as a starter, and then the Rays opened for him. So I could see an opener tomorrow afternoon for sure. The Rays open for him.
There's that echo again.
Oh no, it was just me. I was just copying the link.
So I mean, I'm just looking at the, like, just thinking about it. So they're 8-2 in the last 10. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. 8-2.
And the bats have been like out of this world with those, like, what did they score? 30, was it 30 something in like, or
44?
Yeah, in like I'm just worried about, and this is just me being like, I don't know what it is, like a pessimist, but I'm just worried about the regression and coming back and the bats going cold at like the worst possible time. I mean, there's no way to know if that's going to happen or not, but it's just.
I mean, they've scored 87 runs in the last 10 games. So, and they had this period in August where collectively they got into a bit of a funk. But I mean, over the season, they've been a pretty good offensive team. Like they've scored a ton of runs. Okay, the last 5-10 games have just been crazy. Like especially that series against Baltimore. I don't think I've seen a whole lot of stuff like that coming back and winning the way they did. But overall, I mean, they've always had a really, really high run differential. They've been a very good offensive team, and especially that purple patch when George Springer was hot before his second stint on the IL. That offense was firing on all cylinders. So I'd be less worried about that. Yeah, there will be some regression to the mean. You're not going to see, 87 runs over a 10-game period. But I think I'd be okay because the other good thing going for them is if you look at, I can knock on wood, I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves. If you're talking about playoffs and you're talking about, okay, we'll see, wild card is a 1-game crapshoot, no one knows. But let's say if you're talking about a 5-game series in ALDS, you have 4 pretty good pitchers to throw out there. Ray, Berrios, Rio, Manoa, you're going to be in the game, right? So even if hopefully offense doesn't get into that collective funk, but you don't always have to score 7-8 runs to win. I mean, I think the pitching staff is good enough, deep enough to carry you through into the playoffs as well. And the way Max has been pitching last little while, I mean, I'll be fine with it.
Yep.
Too.
Knock on wood, thinking ahead. Assuming the Jays are the wild card team or get to the wild card game and win it, they're going to play Tampa in the ALDS. So I think the starters have been fine against them. So now it's a matter. So you can definitely match up, but with close games, it's going to really come down to battle of the bullpens. And I could see the Rays going nuts, they're on the 3 innings max for any of their starters. Nobody's I could see Cass going completely crazy. And beyond like what's a reasonable amount of crazy when it comes to bullpen usage.
I mean, it's a dominant bullpen, right? So yeah, why wouldn't you? If you're Kevin Cash, why wouldn't you do that? Because I mean, they're the best bullpen in the AL. Yeah, I don't see why would you let your starters even go 2 times the lineup, unless you're talking about 1 or 2 top of the rotation guys. I would use a starter every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. I
So I
think
think
they're pure Rays.
I think it counted. There's about 17-ish games left.
Mhm.
We're at 81 wins. Realistically, what are we looking at in your assessment to get into the playoffs?
I think
How many
91 to be
wins are we?
safe.
Yeah.
I think so.
One. Yeah. Assuming you dominate the weaker part of the schedule, like let's say 7 against the Twins, 3 against the Orioles, that's 10 games, and let's say you win 7 of those, then you got to win 3 versus the final 4 versus Tampa, and 3 versus the Yankees. So you got to go maybe 3-4 against them, and then 7-3 against the weaker teams, and that gets you to 91. Hopefully that does it, assuming that obviously we got to make sure that you can control. You have a little bit of control of your own destiny over the Yankees, not so much Boston or Seattle or Oakland. But that's sort of what they have to be looking at. I do think.
I agree. So if you 17 games left, you're probably looking at 11-6. Worst case, if all other results go your way, you're talking about 10-7. But I think 91 to be safe. They're at what, 80-64 now?
Yep. Tomorrow's game is important. You have Ray. You have a matchup advantage against the weaker starter. Again, you're not going to get many look. The Rays won't let the Jays have many looks at them, but they'll have a window to do some damage. And it's important because it gives them that leeway if they go and lose the series in Tropicana. Like at least you could say you split against the Rays. So you could say that you win the home series against the Rays and gives them that leeway, assuming that they play well against the Twins.
Yeah, I agree. So this is how I look at it, right? I mean, so Thursday is an off day because, I mean, sure, we say Yankees have a slightly tougher schedule. So Wednesday, all 3 teams, Yankees, Red Sox, and the Blue Jays, they finish the existing series. It's an off day for the Blue Jays, I think for the Red Sox as well. Yankees have a series against Baltimore. Well, they're playing a one-off game against Baltimore from this previous series. Sorry, my bad. Friday, Blue Jays start the series against the Twins. Red Sox are playing Baltimore, and New York is playing Cleveland. So chances are you're not going to gain any ground. You're not going to, hopefully, if you win the series, you're not going to lose any ground. All 3 teams are playing sub 500 teams and pretty bad teams at that. So once you get through that series, then the Yankees are playing Rangers, which means they're still playing a bad team, a really, really bad team. Red Sox have a series against, what do we have here? Red Sox are going to play the Mets. Okay, so that's somewhat competitive. And Jays are going to be playing the Rays. So, I mean, you would assume that the Yankees are probably going to win this series. Don't know about Red Sox, but this is where you can really lose ground, like a couple of games or something. So that's why I hope they win tomorrow.
Yeah.
The best part is that we actually get to have this discussion to begin with. It's like, you know, a little while ago, it was kind of like, nah, I don't know if they're going to make it. I don't know if they're going to even make it close. But now, like, with this run that they went on, which was like, it was unprecedented. Like, there's no way that anybody. I was talking to some friends today, talking about how, like, because I think I mentioned before how some of my friends were kind of shitting on the Barrios trade, and it's kind of like, I just made a comment of, oh, that trade doesn't look so bad anymore now, does it? And he's like, well, come on, man. There's no way they could have known that this was going to happen, which is entirely true, but it's fucking fantastic that it did.
Yeah, and that's the thing about baseball, right? Like a lot of results happen. It's such a long. So I always give people this analogy, right? So we always talk about going into September, 6 games back, 7 games back. If you're 50 games in an NBA and a hockey season, if you're 7 games back, are you giving up on playoffs if you're a good team? Probably not, because 50 to 82 seems really long. Right now, you're playing the same number of games in just a month, so it seems
The
like
NBA you would. Because if you're 7 games out of the 8th seed in the NBA,
well, yeah,
you're better off tanking.
Except now with the play-in, now it still kind of makes you relevant.
So no, but the point being that
I know what you mean.
So you would expect that at some point, and it's kind of similar to what Anthopoulos did, right? You have such a crazy run differential. The offense, barring some crazy, frozen bats for a few games, the offense is going to carry you. Chris Colabello was hitting like 3rd highest BABIP of all time or something that season. All you have to do is put in someone like David Price, and the odds of winning a game are infinitely higher. And that's what you do with the Berrios trade as well. And obviously, who knew Robbie Wade would turn into what he is? You can see why, yes, it's been unprecedented, but I don't want to say it's expected, but it's not surprising because it is a good offense. And now pitchers are pitching well as well. And the team's like firing on all cylinders. So, yeah, I mean, no one plans a season by going like 10-0 and 9-1 and being in contention. But I think sometimes being 7 games out, 8 games out in baseball, sometime around in August, people still look at it from the lens of basketball and hockey than baseball itself.
Well, fewer playoff teams. So if you're 7 games out, you're not a bad team.
Exactly.
In other sports and basketball specifically, you probably are. You're better off tanking it out, like punting the year than going forward.
For sure.
Yeah, and I guess that's it, right? There's the philosophical difference, and like in basketball, you have the option of tanking and immediately improving not necessarily guaranteed, but you have a much better chance of improving your outlook in the future just by simply tanking, which isn't the case. And that's that's a roster size thing, because baseball, you're carrying how many guys on your roster?
26. Whereas
basketball, you have 15 guys on your active roster. So one guy makes a world of difference. Whereas with baseball, one guy makes at best maybe like a 5 if he's a really good player, a 5-game difference ish, over like a baseball season, which is it's a lot, but it's nothing when you really look
exactly.
at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, and playoffs aside, like we always get caught up in like going deep in playoffs, which is all cool. But in all honesty, if you just sit back and enjoy the journey and not worry about what's going to happen at the end of the season, this is a fucking good September, right? Like this is a month we'll probably talk about in a few years as well. As long as you're playing meaningful games and you're not playing out the season just for the heck of it, this is good baseball. This is a lot of fun. This is the kind of games that can bring a lot of fans in as well. Like, it's a fun team to watch. At this point, I do care about the playoffs, but just enjoying every single game I think it's a privilege to watch this team the way it's playing.
I mean, this is what we wanted for so long before those Anthopoulos teams. It was meaningful baseball in September, which we hadn't had in like what was it since the World Series teams, or maybe the Delgado teams at one point were close in September.
Not really. One year they were sort of close, but not really. This would be the most. Before the Anthopoulos teams, there were a couple of years where they had a puncher's chance, but the Anthopoulos teams were the first teams that really, the last 2 weeks of the season, okay, we're going to get in, or we have a really good shot at getting in.
And when you think about it, that's so sad that in a 30-year period, there's been a handful of teams that actually got you excited. I remember as a kid getting excited over even meaningful August baseball.
Exactly, right? I mean, for the most part, we're talking about selling in August. Finally, we have a chance. And what I find funny is we always tell Rogers should act like a big market, owners, and like Blue Jays should be a big market team. Freaking act like a big market fan base as well. Like stop your fascination with fringe players. Be happy that you're getting good pitchers, and don't worry about the Austin Martins and Simeon Woods Richardsons of the world, who may end up being very good players, but not today. So just enjoy that.
If you keep waiting for those guys, like you could end up waiting forever, and nothing will pan out, and you'll always be chasing the what ifs. What if this guy pans out? And you're sometimes you have to take that risk and just say, you know what, forget it. Let's go for it. Let's bring in the Barrios. Let's trade 2 prospects. And we've said this countless number of times on the show, where we don't know everything that goes on in the organization. We don't know what they're seeing. So, I mean, I'm all for it, man. Like, this is fun. Like, you guys know, I haven't been super into baseball except for last year where we had that wild card run, and then this year. This year even more because of what happened last year. Sure, I wasn't watching for the first few months, but that was mostly because basketball was on. But now it's like I'm all in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and who knows? Gone are the days. It's very unlikely you're going to have a dynasty. So don't worry about all these prospects are going to turn into gold, and you're going to have the Yankees of the 20s where you're going to win 7 titles in a row. You're going to get probably one shot. You better make good use of it, because if not, next year you might not have Simeon, you might not have Ray, you might have some other players. It might still be a very good team, but Vlad might still be a very good player, but is he going to be an MVP candidate every year? Hopefully, but you don't know these things, right? So when there's a shot, you take it.
Mm-hmm. Or if you want to have a prolonged dynasty, you got to go and tank for a good 4, lose 100 games in a row for 4 years in a row.
Yeah, but Cubs did that, 1 title. Houston did that, 1 title.
But at least they had shots. I mean, Houston made it. Well,
I mean, you got to tank and you got to develop a good cheating system, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Cubs had I think 2 years in the LCS as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they had some success, no question, right? But I mean, look at the incredible turnaround. You have this team within 4 years of 2016. Even if you discount last year, you're only 3 seasons separate you from the 2016 team. That's freaking good, and this is a good team as well. So, I would take this any day of the week. I'm done with prospects, man. Like, sure, hopefully they turn into superstars. You don't want to just go like be a highway robber all the time, and people stop trading with you. You want to give a good talent to get great talent. So.
I like a mix. I think you need to have young stars come up. Most successful.
A lot of them on the team.
You need to make sure that you have that, because you get that guy, and let's say you just get him for 6 years, it gives you that leeway to set up around him. That doesn't guarantee anything. You still have to make good decisions, but it's hard to you're never going to say pull the plug on it and do a full tank job if you have some homegrown stars.
For sure, 100%. And the team, the core is young, right? You have Vlad, you have Bo.
Yeah.
I mean, they built it around the young stars. They added a couple of veterans, and now the second generation of prospects, they're using them as trade chips, and they still have a couple of guys who are highly touted who might be on this roster in a couple of years. You have Moreno, you have incredible catching depth right now. Well, I mean, not incredible, but they have good, solid catching depth. They have Relvis Martinez could be the next shortstop.
They're a base,
yeah. So, but I mean, you do have good prospects, right? So.
And that's the thing, right? Once you already have those couple of blue chip guys who are on your roster, that's when you can start to say, okay, we don't need to wait for these other prospects anymore. Now we can make a deal for somebody who's established. And that's one thing that I've always said in basketball as well. Sometimes it's better to make a move and move off of somebody who might have a bright future but there's this guy who fits in perfectly with your roster. He's a little bit older, but he makes you a contender now, whereas the other guy might make you a contender in a couple years, but it's not a given, right? And that, like, sometimes you get into that trap of just waiting and then you never really end up going anywhere.
Exactly.
Is the whole Shapiro Atkins obsessed with prospects, not wanting to spend or take risk narrative gone?
I think so.
It should be.
I would hope so.
I mean, they've done a whole lot of things last couple, like this season, right? They signed a big name free agent. They shelled out $150 million on one guy. They traded away their biggest prospects. Good thing they didn't do it for a rental. They still have Barrios for one more year. They went, and this is something that is so understated, but I can't believe they went with the best possible roster for the first game of the season. They did not option Kirk. They went with the best available guys. The intention always was to give this team a chance to do as well as it could. And I think, so, I mean, all the narratives should basically go away after the season, regardless of whether they make the playoffs or not.
Yeah, I don't see the Shapiro Atkins hate anymore. Now it's all being directed towards Charlie.
it really, yeah, exactly.
Like you can't hate, like they.
But Charlie's
I mean, you called it
manager for that. He wouldn't care. He's like one of those guys. He'll play his whatever instrument he plays, and he'll be happy. And like,
and there are some things that sometimes that I'll admit do irritate me a little bit.
He's an
he
easy
does
target.
make some decisions, no question.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, Ron, you were saying something?
No, I was just gonna say how Pramit called it as soon as Barrios got pulled. He's like, here comes the Charlie hate on Twitter.
Yeah, even though they showed on TV, they showed the trainer talking to Barrios and Montoyo, but it was still kind of iffy. But as soon as, because I saw 87 pitches, 7 innings, I was like, oh, here it comes. And then now it turns out that he was hurt.
But people will overlook that and just say he shouldn't have pulled him. There are some people on Twitter who just want to jump on board the hate train and will just shit on him because it's Charlie.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you guys. So just taking it back to the 2015 team, does Gibby do a better job with this team than Charlie?
I don't think a little bit, maybe, but not a material difference. Maybe 1 win, 2 wins.
I don't even know. I don't see much. Charlie's more. I mean, Charlie's done things like a couple of times, like he's open to using an opener. They don't have to do that anymore. They did that a couple of times earlier in the year. 4-man outfield here and there. I don't see much difference. Like,
I mean, there are a couple of bullpen decisions might have been a little bit different. A couple of times, Charlie, it's just a couple of head scratches, bunting at the wrong time, but that seems to be a malaise. But so a few decisions. That's why I say 1, 2 wins maybe. I honestly don't know how many wins a manager adds in baseball, to be very honest.
Are there any metrics like around that? Has anybody done any kind of like analytic stuff around it?
Well, if I don't know, I have to look into it. But Pramit, if you remember, when we went to Sabre Seminar in 2013, someone had a presentation, and I think we skipped it because we were hungry. But it was about using Pythagoras' theorem to calculate the manager's success or something like that. So I don't know. But I did read one research once that someone tried to calculate WAR for general managers. And Dave Dombrowski came out at the top of those, of course, because he trades away everything inside.
I think it's impossible to judge that because you don't know the information. You do not have any of the information that they're going to. Like sometimes it's something as this person is having a very stressful situation in their family life. They're available, but are they really locked in to perform with like this reliever? Maybe give him a day off with that kind of thing. Like we just like stuff that we wouldn't see. So it's just, how do you judge that? We don't have enough information.
And there's something I've probably learned watching other sports, that sometimes the same position in two different scenarios might not work out for a lot of reasons, right? Because sometimes maybe a person, a manager, is better at managing a restricted resource, but if you give him a little bit more, they tend to lose control of things pretty fast. So if you go back and think about Joe Madden, like how like everyone thought he was a genius, some like from outer space when he was managing the Rays, right? And doing all these creative things and people loving him, and he has these teams and for trips, like for these obviously road games, and he's amazing. And the more you see him in spotlight in Chicago, you started to see that it's not as much as people like this wasn't as much there as people thought there was, right? He made a lot of bonehead decisions, including in the World Series. I haven't followed him a whole lot in LA, so I can't say much. But
I think we've heard his reputation
a little bit. Sometimes I think there's no question, but sometimes we attribute too many wins or losses to them.
The guy ended was the manager that ended the Cubs' drought, and he's probably more disliked. He's probably become more overrated. Like he burnt out reliever, the Javier Baez bunting. I don't know. Tampa's supposed to be all these Tampa guys are supposed to be the most progressive thinking and understanding that sacrifice bunting is not a sound strategy. Yet they keep fucking doing it every time when they leave Tampa. Like, what is this?
It's like their hands were tied in Tampa. You sack bunt and you get fired, right? So they start to.
There were times
you know what?
There were times when Gibby would have them. I know he had less of a raw. He had the raw. He had less of the kind. I mean, now I think Charlie cut back on it, unless it's like a Breivik Valera type guy. But there were times like when the lineup wasn't as deep as it is now, where Charlie did it a lot. Gibby had. He's like, I can't say what he would have done differently because he had very different lineup construction. He had veteran guys. He didn't have like guys that were set in their ways. He was better at managing like egos, for example. So like maybe like he could. Like it's hard to say. I mean, it's impossible to say if he would have been better or worse. I do think that there probably would have been some better bullpen management, but then again, he could have done some odd things as well.
But there is definitely something to the notion of their hands being tied when they're in a specific organization. I think sometimes with these guys like Madden, they kind of sometimes there's the message that's coming from up high that makes them look like a genius, and they kind of get caught up in their own character of being this genius who does like these crazy things and leads to winning. And then when you go somewhere else, like you see that that's not necessarily the case all the time. And like I remember listening to the Woj podcast, and he had Monty Williams on, and Monty Williams was talking about how, in a lot of organizations in the NBA, it's definitely a lot of that where it's the front office telling you this is how you're going to do things. You're not making the decisions, basically, like, who you're playing. And I'm sure the same applies to baseball because, there's the organizational view on how the organizational philosophy, essentially, on how you're going to do things. And managers don't necessarily have any kind of control over that because, their job is dependent on it. Like Moneyball, perfect example, right? Go ahead.
No, yeah, you're right. Because I go back to what Brian Cashman said, what a job of a modern day manager is, and that's part psychologist, part White House press secretary. And that's the lens you've got to look at. And Andrew Storen, I think 4 or 5 months ago, when you were starting to see a lot of this Charlie hate, he wrote a pretty interesting piece, and he said that because teams hire a particular manager for a particular reason, right? I think Gibby may not have worked very well with this group. Gibby was always good with that veteran team, right? He managed those personalities. Charlie's a bit more of a looser guy. I think probably they wanted that, someone who could speak Spanish, have that close connection and everything. So I think it worked out well for them. But what a lot of teams do is they know that managers sometimes do not so smart things. And it's true for all managers, not just Charlie Montoya. We watch him every day, so it gets amplified. What front offices try to do is idiot proof the team. Take away the tools, right? Don't give them the players that they'll misuse, or just bulletproof your roster to a point where the manager is not forced into making these weird choices. And I think over time, Blue Jays have done a little bit of that as well, right? Once you improve your bullpen, you have a couple of lefty bats on the bench. You've as once you start seeing additions, you saw those questionable decisions dwindle down as well a little bit, right? Because yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, just like in corporations, like we try to put a process automation somewhere because we want to idiot proof or human proof things, right? Because, so I think it's one of those things. So,
well, what I find interesting is that if you listen to everything Shapiro talks about in terms of leadership and building, it's empowering people to make decisions and be like take control and grow as individuals, right? But the manager on the field, it's almost like, okay, it's more process oriented. Just
don't fuck it up.
Just don't fuck it up. Just, all right, here's the information. Do it. Just make the decision. Make the decision. Do some meet with the media. Do some personality management. So I do find that interesting that for an organization that is all about empowering its people and growing and developing its people, it could the manager role on the surface appears to be, again, the role of the manager on the field might be diminished somewhat. Always whenever they meet with the media, they're very quick to say when asking about lineup, and then both Lyra and Atkins say, well, that's ultimately up to Charlie. That's ultimately up to Charlie. So it's so, again, there have been games where I've just banged my head, like the Tyler Chatwood game. Just times where I felt like, you could have probably let the starter, like even yesterday, couldn't they have let Manoah finish the game? Like, or why would you bring in one of your higher leverage guys in an 8-0 game? Like, when you just called the guy up like Baraki from the minors, like, that would be a perfect game for him to come in. So just like those kinds of things, it's just like, why? Like,
I'll tell you why. This is what Charlie's doing. He pulls out the manual. He goes to the page and says, okay, if this, do this. That's what it really does feel like sometimes.
I would agree.
Yeah, unless like Trevor Richards said like, hey, I want to get in the game. I'm working on I don't know, my changeup is off. I want to pitch in a low leverage situation to get it right. I mean, it could be something like that. Even he's like, I'm fresh. Just please, I want to pitch in a low leverage game to work on a pitch. Maybe, I don't know. But there are times where I'm just banging my head, and and for people to say, oh, well, they're just looking at the analytics and just like, it's not like that. Like at that point, you can just hire like AI bot. Like you can just hire like Siri to manage your game for you. Like I don't accept the notion that it's all analytics and the manager just does whatever the front office tells him to do and just gives them the data. Like, no, because stuff like, yeah, you plan for outcomes. You can't plan for every single thing. You could say as much as you want. Oh, this guy has a hard slider against this hitter, or if the slider isn't working, you got to react. Like, do you keep him out there? And let him figure it out? Do you take him out? So, like, I can't accept. I don't buy it that it's just simply the manager.
No, for sure not. But I think there's a lot that a manager does. I think, but sometimes a lot of it is common sense. Like we can nitpick a few things here and there, right? But at the end of the day, it's not like basketball. It's not like hockey where the manager can make a much, or a coach, sorry, can make a much bigger difference, right? Because you're pretty much calling everything. And it's a little bit different. So even though if their front offices are telling them this is how you're going to coach, but at least I think they have managers in baseball have less leeway than other sports for sure. I mean, no matter what you do, you have to put Vlad top 1, 2, or 3, right? like you're restricted with your decisions. You're not going to put Vlad at 9.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see some managers doing it tough, giving him tough love on the bench, right? He doesn't legs out.
Well, I think we also have to, as Andrew Stoughton likes to point out, everybody hated Gibbons and Anthopoulos before July of 2015 as well.
That's why I asked the question, because it kind of, when Stoughton said that, it kind of triggered it, and I was just wondering, like,
amazing how trading for David Price and Troy Tulowitzki make you smart.
Yeah, if you remember, 2015, they were losing a ton of games, and then they went to Washington. They were supposed to play a doubleheader, and apparently, Jeff Blair still maintains that, and so many people reported that evening John Gibbons was supposed to be fired, and then they won those 2 doubleheaders. I don't know if 2 wins really would have made a difference. I think it's still a rumor. And then they went on a bit of a streak, and then they acquired all those players. And the rest is history. But there were a lot of rumors even during the right around until
who was ordering the firing.
I don't know. I mean, it was a rumor. I remember it very well. They were going to play a doubleheader in Washington, and they beat Max Scherzer.
That was the second game. So the first game, Royals, they lost. And then between games, they opted to take naps because they started tracking sleep habits to take a nap between games. So all the players took naps, and then I think Pilar hit 2 home runs that game off of Scherzer, and that started the streak.
The naps did it, man. The naps saved him.
But I don't know how. But the thing that with Gibbons on the who was good? They were all on the way out. What was it coming from ownership?
I have no idea. No, Shapiro hadn't been hired by then.
Yeah, so it was still Beeston and Anthopoulos, but
it was still Beeston and Anthopoulos, and Shapiro was not even in the picture back then.
And we knew Beeston was gone. The Anthopoulos situation was iffy, and around that time, apparently Beeston had told Anthopoulos, "Go for it this year, because I think you're going to be gone too."
But hey. I'm just wondering about it, like. I could honestly see, because think about the optics of you win a couple games and you get fired right after winning a couple of games. Like, I don't know that that's ever happened. So it could very well be that winning those couple of games saved him.
Well, maybe, but that means you obviously haven't followed Pakistan cricket. They exclusively fire their people after winning games.
Well, is it normally the decision made prior to, but you just have to deal with the logistics of hiring whoever replaces them, the logistical, like if you're bringing somebody up from the minors, you're reshuffling the coaching staff, getting all that stuff settled. So it may take a day or two, like a couple of days. It's not, I don't think, it's rare that I think one regular season game will be like that. Like usually, everybody knows it's coming. Now, you could be fired, for blowing a bad playoff game or a playoff series. Like that you should have won.
Coach Casey.
Well, he had multiple,
yeah,
and just in general making things life hard in the playoff. But anyway, but Casey was always there was always a bit of that iffiness. He was never a Masai's guy. The deals were never super long term, so you kind of.
But he got saved. He got saved in a similar fashion after that after the trade, and it was like you thought he was going to be on his way out, and then they had that run, and it's like you can't really get rid of him after that.
Mm-hmm. And then even after they could have pulled the plug after the Washington sweep, and they didn't.
Yeah, which is when they should have.
Yeah, somehow, and I don't. Ultimately, to this day, I don't. Nick Nurse talked about it in his book that. He survived because he was in charge of the offense, and the offense held over, and that it was the defense that fell. So he survived. All the other assistants got let go. I still don't to this day know how Casey survived that one. It could have just been the organization saying, no, we're not going to. And there were even rumors that Kyle Lowry wanted Casey gone after that series. And it could have been the organization saying, no, we're not going to let players dictate this, and we're going to have the players be held accountable. And we'll stick with them.
Yeah, because what surprised me, and Casey was never considered an X's and O's guy, and like knowing what we know of Masai, yeah, it's surprising that he survived as long as he did.
Cockroach, man. He just. I honestly like. I did like the guy. Like not obviously not some of his decisions, but
His wardrobe.
didn't like his wardrobe either. I like the pound the rock. That was creative.
That doesn't work in like the
It wasn't.
second round of the playoffs. Well, you know what? It's gonna keep at it.
But that's exactly what he did, man. It was just like hitting, like banging your head against the wall constantly and see if something happens. Like I remember being at that Washington series. I think I went to like game. I don't know if it was game 2 or game 1 or like were we? I don't know if we were at home, but I remember going to one of those games and it was just a dud. And then the game that we lost the series, I think we had my engagement party and everybody was watching it at the engagement party, and it was such a like a bad feeling afterwards because everybody was so down that we got destroyed.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how. I mean, and the next year they get to the conference finals despite going a full 7 games in the first 2 rounds that they. In both cases, they were the superior team.
Yeah, man. Casey had a way of just
and then they won completely... games in the Cleveland series because Cleveland decided to get drunk when they were in Toronto.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, because apparently they lost those 2 games, and then Ty Lue like yelled at them, saying, "What the fuck is wrong with you guys? Like, stop partying." And then they took it seriously again, and it was over. So
I didn't realize that was actually a thing.
That was a thing that came out maybe a couple of years later. The Cleveland was up 2-0, came to town, and they just started partying hard that weekend.
Kevin Love was at the front of that.
J.R. Smith, they all were. They're all fucking around.
J.R. Yeah.
And somehow, so it really should have been 3 straight sweeps.
Yeah, it should have been. But all right, guys, I think that's a good spot to end it off. Talking about rounding it off with Casey's terrible end to his reign in Toronto. I mean, Jays tomorrow. I'm going to call a win. You guys want to throw out your predictions?
Win.
Win.
But we're going to come back the day after and look at this, and it's just going to be like just sadness.
Every time I think that things are going to go bad for them, they end up going on a run. I called 2 weeks ago that, it's just unlikely, like, just given the schedule and the number of teams. I didn't expect them to go, like, freaking 10-1 and the Yankees do 7 in a row at the same time. Like, come on, nobody saw that coming.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is maybe we do this again next week. Similar thing, post game. Maybe if Charles can come back, maybe we give him a heads up, pick a day. Yeah,
definitely,
absolutely. And thank you to the 3 viewers we had. So
we had 3 viewers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, we hit our high. So thank you. If please make sure you like the show, subscribe as well. Hit us up with any comments. Let us know what you want to hear. I know some people like to see our Raptor stuff. I know some people like the baseball stuff. If there's a mix of the two, just let us know if there's anything you're interested in us doing. We'll definitely do it. And we appreciate the support. And I'm sure you'll be seeing us again next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.